As we arrived at the house, a strange feeling overwhelmed me, as if I had been there before, even though I knew it was my first time. The atmosphere was heavy, laden with an unsettling silence that hung in the air, as if the walls had absorbed dark secrets over the years. I glanced at Sarah, who seemed as lost in her thoughts as I was. My heart raced, and a shiver ran down my spine as we crossed the threshold of that old house, whose worn tiles and dusty windows seemed to tell stories of other lives. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to break the silence that had settled between us. "I'm just trying to get used to this place," Sarah replied, with a nervous smile that didn't convince either of us. Tom, our oldest son, was a bit ahead, his eyes wide with wonder at the grandeur of the house. Lily, our youngest daughter, dashed ahead like a little explorer in unfamiliar territory. The sound of her footsteps echoed through the hallways, and in an instant, she disappeared into one of the rooms. I followed her, but what I found was a library, filled with dusty books and furniture covered in white sheets, as if the objects had been sleeping for a long time. "Wow, look at this!" Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. She stood before a bookshelf, her small hands brushing against the spines of the books. "Be careful, don't touch everything," I warned, but my tone failed to contain her enthusiasm. It was hard to resist the allure of the place. As she explored, my eyes were drawn to a dusty diary, forgotten among the volumes. I crouched down to pick it up, and as I opened it, a cloud of dust rose, making me sneeze. The pages were yellowed, and the handwritten letters seemed to have been made with an old pen. "What did you find, Dad?" Lily asked, now beside me, watching with curiosity. "A diary. It seems to belong to a girl named Clara," I replied, trying to hide the curiosity that was growing inside me. The first pages spoke of her life, her play, and as I read, a strange connection began to form. It was as if Clara were speaking to me, sharing her joys and sorrows. "What else does it say?" Lily insisted, looking up at me with genuine interest. "She talks about her friends, school," I began to read aloud, but soon I realized the story was starting to change. Clara mentioned an accident, something that left her sad and alone. I was interrupted by a noise coming from upstairs, as if someone had dragged a piece of furniture. "Sarah!" I called, but received no answer. "Did you hear that?" Lily shook her head, looking more intrigued than scared. The diary fell from my hands, and I headed toward the staircase, hesitating for a moment. The feeling of déjà vu intensified, and I didn't know if it was just my imagination or if there was something more in that place. Suddenly, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide. "What was that noise?" she asked, a mix of worry and confusion in her voice. "I don't know, it seemed to come from upstairs," I replied, trying to hide the growing unease inside me. "Let's investigate," Sarah said, with a determination that didn't match the fear I perceived in her eyes. We climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing like a warning. The hallway was shrouded in shadows, and the closed doors seemed to harbor secrets we didn't want to uncover. When we reached the end of the corridor, the door to a room was ajar. A faint glimmer of light escaped from inside, and something told me that's where the sound had originated. "Are you going to open it?" Sarah asked, her voice almost a whisper. "Let's do it together," I replied, taking the doorknob and opening the door slowly. The room was empty, but the atmosphere felt different, something heavy and tense lingered in the air. The windows were closed, yet a strange breeze seemed to circulate between us. "It's like something is here," I murmured, looking around. "Let's go back," Sarah suggested, but before we could leave, Lily appeared in the doorway, breathless. "You won't believe what I found," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and excitement. "What is it, Lily?" I asked, trying to mask my anxiety. "I found an old toy in the garden," she said, holding up a rag doll that looked like it had seen better days. It was lying in the grass, and, her voice dropped to a whisper, I heard a voice telling me to pick it up. I exchanged glances with Sarah, and a feeling of discomfort settled between us. Lily's voice echoed in my mind, and the idea that something more could be present in that house unsettled me. "Are you okay, Lily?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "Yes. But the doll," she began, but before she could finish, a noise from upstairs interrupted our conversation. It was a dragging sound, as if something was being moved. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, looking around as if expecting something or someone to appear. "But what is it?" Lily insisted, still holding the doll. "I don't know, but we should be cautious," I replied. Curiosity was turning into fear, and I didn't know how to handle it. We returned to the library, and the diary was still there, open to a page that spoke of Clara's friendship with a girl named Alice. However, the writing was becoming more confused, as if Clara were struggling with her emotions. "What are you reading?" Lily asked, approaching me again. "It's about Clara and her friends," I started, but the feeling that something was wrong made me hesitate. "Let's put this aside for now. Do you think Clara is still here?" Lily asked, a hopeful sparkle in her eyes. "I don't know, but I feel like there's something more in this house," I replied, trying to be honest. "Let's focus on exploring and discovering more about her." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of emotions. Sarah felt increasingly uneasy, while Tom seemed lost in his own world. As night approached, the house seemed to come alive, filled with sounds and movements that surrounded us, as if it were watching us. Every creak, every whisper heightened the tension. When we finally gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was charged. The table was set, but the silence was deafening. "What did you think of the house, Tom?" I asked, trying to break the tension. "Strange," he replied, with a distant look. "I believe something isn't right here." "We all feel that way," Sarah said, looking at him with concern. Lily, however, seemed eager to share her discoveries. "I found a doll in the garden. It's so pretty," she exclaimed, but her enthusiasm wasn't met with Tom's response, who simply shook his head. "I hope you didn't bring that inside," Sarah said, trying to keep things light, but there was genuine worry in her voice. "No, I left it outside," Lily replied, with a dismissive look. The conversation soon dwindled, and each of us got lost in our own thoughts. The feeling of déjà vu lingered, and I couldn't understand why this house affected me so much. A part of me wanted to explore every corner, while another part yearned to escape as quickly as possible. Later that night, as I tried to sleep, a sense of restlessness washed over me again. The sound of the wind howling outside seemed to whisper secrets in my ear. What exactly did Clara want? Why did this house feel so connected to her? The questions swirled in my mind, but the answers remained elusive, like a shadow hiding behind the walls. Aware that morning would bring more discoveries and perhaps more answers, I finally closed my eyes, wishing that the next day would be less unsettling than this one. The house felt alive, breathing with its ancient secrets and an atmosphere that left me uneasy. While Sarah tried to organize things, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Tom, my oldest son, was in his room, and the silence that hung over the house was disturbing. The last thing I wanted was for my children to feel the pressure of this strange house, but I couldn't prevent the worry from settling in my mind. On the first day, Tom had shown enthusiasm about the move, but as the days passed, his cheerful expression grew increasingly somber. I found him sitting on his bed, staring at the floor, as if he were battling some kind of invisible demon. "Tom," I said as I entered the room. "Is everything okay, son?" He lifted his head, and I saw something different in his eyes. It was as if he were distant, as if he weren't really there. I'm just tired, Dad," he replied, but he didn't sound convinced. That night, while we tried to rest, the silence was shattered by a piercing scream that made me jump out of bed. I ran to Tom's room, and upon opening the door, I found my son sitting on the bed, wide-eyed, his body trembling. What happened? I asked, terrified. Nightmares, he said, his voice shaky. She was there again. Who was there, Tom? The question slipped from my lips before I could think. Clara, he murmured, and my heart sank. She said she needs us. Sarah's expression upon hearing this was one of pure concern. Who is Clara? She asked, her gaze darting between me and Tom. She's a girl, Tom replied, still visibly frightened. She's trapped, and needs help. Sarah looked at me, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. You can't keep feeling this way, Tom. It's just a dream, I tried to calm him. Let's talk until you feel better. What else did she say? She said I need to help her. That I'm the only one who can do it, said Tom, his voice filled with an urgency that unsettled me. The next morning, as I tried to deal with the situation, I saw Lily exploring the house. She always had this insatiable curiosity, and as I watched her, I noticed she was fascinated by everything around her. It was as if the house had a magnetism that drew not only her attention but mine as well. Hey, Lily. I called, and she turned to me with a smile. Look what I found, she exclaimed, holding up a dusty diary. It was in the library. The diary looked old, covered in dust, and I felt a pang of concern seeing her so interested in something that could be potentially disturbing. What's written in it? I asked, trying to hide my apprehension. I don't know yet. But it looks like it belonged to a girl named Clara, she replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. The name echoed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper in that connection. Lily, maybe it's best not to get too involved with that, I said, trying to be cautious. Sometimes, these things can be complicated. But Dad, it's just a story. And Clara seems nice, she insisted, and I realized that no matter how much I tried to protect her, I wouldn't be able to stop her interest. Meanwhile, Sarah was busy with the chores around the house, but I noticed she seemed increasingly restless. Are you okay? I asked her, watching her move objects from one place to another. I don't know, she replied, her expression revealing a mix of stress and confusion. Some things are changing places, and I can't understand why. I frowned, thinking. What do you mean? I left the cup on the counter, and now it's not there anymore. And I don't remember moving it, she explained, and I noticed the tension in her voice. It's just things that can happen in an old house, I tried to reassure her. Maybe the house has its own quirks. But deep down, the unease I felt was growing. The atmosphere in the house seemed to shift with each passing day, and I was sure something more was hiding in the shadows. That night, as we tried to sleep again, Tom's screams echoed down the hallway, bringing to the surface all the accumulated tension. I ran to his room and found him once more in his bed, terror etched across his face. Tom! I called. What happened this time? She was there, she was screaming. I can't stop hearing it, he babbled, tears streaming down his face. Who was screaming, son? I insisted, trying to understand what was happening to him. Clara. She said I need to help her, or something bad will happen, Tom said, panic in his eyes. Tom, you need to try to forget this. It's just a nightmare, I promise you it's okay, I tried to calm him, but he was too agitated. He turned to me, eyes filled with fear. But what if it's not just a dream? What if she really needs me? His voice was heavy with despair. The next morning, Lily approached Tom at the breakfast table. Hey, Tom. I read more about Clara, she said, trying to sound cheerful, but I could tell it only heightened the tension. You shouldn't get involved with that, Tom replied, frustration evident in his voice. She's not a friend. She is something more. Lily's expression turned confused. But she's just a girl. You can't be afraid of her, Tom. You don't understand. She's not just a girl. She's different. Tom shouted, and I felt the heat of the tension rising. Tom, calm down. I tried to intervene, but the atmosphere was heavy. I just don't want her to hurt us, he said, his voice low and defeated. At that moment, I realized the situation was beyond what I had imagined. Clara's influence seemed to be gaining control over my children, and the idea that something so dark was forming in our home was terrifying. The day dragged on, and the tensions continued to rise. I didn't know what to do, but I felt we needed to act before it was too late. The atmosphere in the house was thick, and every corner seemed to be whispering secrets we weren't ready to hear. Whatever Clara was, she wasn't just a girl. And the truth hiding in the shadows of the house needed to be revealed before any of us paid too high a price. The garden of the old house had a gloomy air, with the shadows of the trees stretching out like thin fingers, and the wind whispering through the dry leaves. The sky was overcast, and a sense of oppression hung in the air, as if the very place was guarding secrets in its depths. I had stepped away from the group, seeking a bit of solitude to process what was happening around us. The diary of Clara, which Lily had found in the library, wouldn't leave my mind. The story of that girl seemed to intertwine with ours in a way I couldn't fully comprehend. Then, while walking hesitantly through the garden, I saw her. Clara was in a dark corner, where the sunlight barely penetrated. Her large, sad eyes seemed to call to me. I hesitated for a moment, but an invisible force drew me closer. "You came," Clara said, her voice soft as a whisper but laden with deep sorrow. "You really came. Who are you?" I asked, feeling my heart race. "Are you the Clara from the diary?" She nodded slowly, and her expression changed, as if the weight of her story was suffocating her. "I need help. I can't leave." "But, what do you mean? What happened to you?" I felt strange talking to a girl who wasn't really there, but the sincerity in her eyes made me believe she was real. "I died here. In the yard." Clara's voice trembled, and I noticed she was struggling not to cry. "It was an accident. My parents, they weren't watching me. And I fell." I felt a lump in my throat upon hearing her words. A part of me wanted to run, but another part, stronger, wanted to understand. "Were you abandoned?" Clara shook her head, and a tear rolled down her pale cheek. "No one knows where I am. They didn't find me. I just wanted to be loved again." She looked at me, and I felt as if I were being pulled into her world. "Now I'm trapped. I need forgiveness." "Forgiveness? From whom?" I was confused, but I didn't want to interrupt her. Hashtag, 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 do you want me to talk to your parents? "No. They can't help me. They're gone," Clara replied, her voice growing softer. "I just want someone to understand me. Someone who isn't afraid of me." In that moment, a wave of compassion washed over me. Clara wasn't a malevolent spirit but a lost child, a soul that hadn't found peace. "I want to help you, Clara. What can I do?" "You need to release me. But for that, you must understand. I can't leave until someone forgives me." She paused, her eyes shining with desperate intensity. "But I don't know how to do that. I can't forget what happened." "Maybe you need to forgive yourself," I suggested, recalling the lessons my mother used to teach me about forgiveness. "Sometimes, forgiveness starts within us." Clara looked at me, and for the first time, a flicker of hope ignited in her gaze. "Do you really think that's how it works? That I can forgive myself for dying?" "Yes," I said, trying to convey all the certainty I had. "You need to let go of that pain, Clara. So you can move on." She hesitated, and a heavy silence settled between us. The wind picked up, making the leaves dance in a silent ballet. Clara seemed to be battling something within herself. "What if I can't? What if I can't forget? What if I hurt you or Tom?" "You wouldn't hurt me." I'm here to help you. We can do this together, I encouraged her, feeling a profound connection with that girl I had never met, but who seemed to carry a burden as heavy as mine. Clara's eyes lit up, but soon darkened again, like a flickering flame. I want to try. But I'm so scared. I'm scared too, I admitted, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. What you need is someone who believes in you. Someone willing to hear your story. Will you help me? Her look was so pure and vulnerable that I felt an overwhelming urge to protect that child, even if she was a spirit. Yes, Clara. I will help you. But we need to do this together. Let's find a way to free you. Clara smiled, and that smile illuminated her pale face. Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me. But soon her eyes grew dark again. But you need to be careful. If they find out I'm here, they might take me away from you. Who, Clara? Who are they? My voice tensed, and a feeling of fear began to spread inside me. Those who left me. The ones who abandoned me. They don't want me here. And if you don't help me, I don't know what could happen. Her voice trembled, and I could feel the weight of her pain. I will help you, Clara. You don't need to be afraid. I spoke, but the unease within me only grew. Silence enveloped the garden once more, and the atmosphere seemed to shift. I didn't know what Clara meant by that warning, but the feeling that something was about to happen began to consume me. When I returned inside the house, the atmosphere was thick with a strange mist, as if the air were vibrating with an unknown energy. I headed toward the library, where Lily was still seated. She was on the floor, surrounded by books, her expression one of determination. Lily, I called, trying to hide the anxiety in my voice. You need to hear what I discovered. Did you find Clara? She asked, her eyes shining with a mix of hope and concern. Yes. And she needs help. She can't leave until someone forgives her. And it seems she's trapped here because of what happened to her family, I replied, feeling the weight of the words. And how can we help her? Lily questioned, looking intently at me as if awaiting a magical answer. I think we need to understand what happened. We need to find out why she can't forgive herself, I said, recalling the intensity of Clara's gaze. We can find more information in the books. Let's uncover everything we can about Clara and her family, Lily suggested, rising and starting to sift through the books around us. Meanwhile, a cold breeze swept over me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The mirrors in the house were covered in a strange mist, and I couldn't shake the thought that something was approaching, something we didn't want to confront. Do you feel that too? I asked Lily, who stopped searching and looked at me. Yes. It's like the house is alive, she replied, her voice low. We need to be careful and not let it affect us. I nodded, but the feeling that time was running out intensified. Clara needed us, and I was determined not to fail her. The fate of that girl was intertwined with mine, and I knew that the only way to free her was to uncover the truth behind her pain. Let's find what we need. We can't let fear paralyze us, I declared, feeling a wave of determination. With one last glance at the garden where Clara had found me, I knew the struggle was just beginning and that the future of all of us might depend on the courage we would have to confront the spirits haunting the old house. The night was especially heavy, and the house seemed to have a life of its own, pulsating with an energy I barely understood. As I tried to organize objects in the living room, Clara's presence followed me like a shadow. That name echoed constantly in my mind, a reminder of what was happening with Tom and Lily. I knew something was very wrong, but I couldn't grasp anything concrete. It was then I decided to go upstairs, hoping to find a clue that could help clarify the situation. The stairs creaked under my feet, and upon reaching the hallway, I realized the atmosphere was even heavier. The walls seemed to close in around me, and a chill ran down my spine. A part of me wanted to turn back, but the other, more curious and determined part, pushed me forward. When I entered Tom's room, a sense of despair enveloped me. He was lying down, eyes closed, but his face was contorted in a look of terror. He woke up abruptly, gasping, and I quickly approached. "Tom, my love, what happened?" I asked softly, trying to calm him. "Clara," he murmured, still trembling. "She was there. She said she needs me." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. "What do you mean she needs you? What did she say?" He looked at me with a mix of fear and confusion. "She said I have to help her take revenge." Those words cut through my heart like blades. Clara was manipulating my son. "Tom, you can't listen to what she says. You need to stay away from her." "But she is. She told me everything about the house. About her family." His voice was loaded with innocence, and I felt powerless in the face of the situation. "Tom, please listen to your mother." "We can't trust her," I pleaded, but he seemed distant, as if an invisible barrier separated him from me. "You don't understand," he shouted, frustrated. "She needs me. I can feel it." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I need to go talk to your sister. Don't worry, everything will be okay." As I descended the stairs, my heart felt like an anchor weighing me down. The relationship between Tom and Clara was becoming increasingly complicated, and I didn't know how to handle it. Arriving in the living room, I found Lily examining an old object she had discovered, a sort of music box. "Lily," I called, trying to hide the anguish in my voice. "We need to talk about Clara." She looked up, her expression showing that something was wrong. "What happened, Mom?" "Tom, he's been having nightmares. He thinks he needs to help Clara," I said hesitantly. Lily frowned. "Do you think she's manipulating him?" "I have that feeling too." "We have to do something before it's too late," I said, feeling the pressure increase in my chest. "The house is full of secrets, and Clara might be one of them." ###, she nodded, but the worry was etched on her face. "What can we do?" "I've already tried talking to her, but she just keeps getting more distant. We need to understand what really happened to Clara. Maybe that will help us free her," I suggested, as the idea began to take shape in my mind. "Let's investigate the history of the house." We set out in search of answers, and as I leafed through old books in the library, a sense of despair began to consume me. What would I find? What more could I do to protect my family? The silence of the house was deafening, and I felt so alone, as if I were fighting against forces I didn't understand. As I examined a dusty shelf, I found an old diary, covered in dust. The title was nearly illegible, but I knew I had to open it. "Lily, come here. Look at this." I called, and she quickly approached. "It's someone's diary who lived here," she said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "It might give us information about Clara." I flipped through the pages and soon found an entry mentioning a girl named Clara. She had an accident in the garden. "It seems she was left alone and abandoned," I said, a knot forming in my throat. "This explains why she feels so connected to this place." "She couldn't move on," Lily said, a sad expression on her face. "She needs help to free herself, but what if she doesn't want to?" The worry grew in my heart. How could we help someone who seemed so lost? "We have to try. I need you to help me find a way to free her, but we need to be cautious." The tension was palpable, and I knew I couldn't do this alone. What else could I uncover about Clara and her story? What more had she endured? As I tried to organize my thoughts, a noise caught our attention. It was a whisper, almost like a distant call. "Did you hear that?" I asked, looking at Lily, who was frozen in place. "Yeah, it sounds like it's coming from upstairs," she replied, her eyes wide with fear. "Let's go," I suggested, forcing courage into my voice. We climbed the stairs slowly, the atmosphere intensifying with each step. The hallway was shrouded in a thick fog, and I knew something was about to happen. When we entered Tom's room, he was awake and sitting on the bed, a vacant look on his face. "Tom." I called, but he didn't seem to hear me. "She needs me," he murmured, his voice distant. "She said I'm the only one who can help her." "Tom, you need to come back to reality. Don't let this take over," I pleaded, but he seemed to be in a trance. Lily moved closer to him, trying to touch his arm. "Tom, please, look at us. We're your family. Don't let her manipulate you." He turned his head slowly, and for a moment, it seemed like he was coming back to himself. "Mom. Lily. I don't want to do this, but I feel like if I don't help, something bad is going to happen. Tom, listen. Clara isn't your friend. She's trapped here, and you shouldn't get involved with this. We need to find out how to free her before it's too late," I said, feeling the urgency of the situation. "But what if she can't leave?" He looked so confused, and I realized Clara had taken hold of his mind, planting doubts and fears. "We need to believe there's a way out. If Clara can't forgive herself, she'll remain trapped forever. And if you let this control you, you might get stuck with her," I said, trying to appeal to his reason. "I just want to help," he shouted, frustration spilling from his heart. "And we want to help too, Tom. But we can't let this destroy us. We have to find a way to bring her into the light," Lily interjected, taking the lead. The tension in the room was thick, and I knew every word mattered. Clara was becoming an increasingly threatening presence, and we needed to act fast. If we can understand what happened to her, maybe we can help her find peace. "Let's look for more information about her accident and her family," I suggested, feeling that this was our only way out. "I'll help," Tom said, finally seeming more focused. "I can't let her control me like this." I looked at him, relieved but still anxious. The battle was far from over, and the house continued to watch us, as if knowing we were about to venture into unknown and dangerous territory. Tom and Lily's determination gave me a glimmer of hope, but Clara's shadow still loomed over us. With renewed focus, we prepared to face the truth, knowing that the journey ahead would be difficult but necessary. The house was filled with secrets, and I was willing to uncover them, not just for myself but for my family. We needed to find a solution before Clara, in her pain, dragged us down into her abyss. As the sun began to set, the golden light filtered through the dusty windows of the old house, casting long and unsettling shadows on the walls. I was in the kitchen, trying to prepare dinner for the family, but my mind was elsewhere. The discovery of Clara's diary in the library still echoed in my head, and the feeling that something was deeply wrong in the house was undeniable. "Sarah, where are the spices?" Tom called, his voice heavy with irritation. He was sitting at the table, fiddling with his phone, but I could tell his mind was somewhere else. His gaze was empty, almost as if he were lost in another world. "On the top shelf, to the right," I replied, trying to stay calm. What more could I do? It was just dinner, right? But the atmosphere in the house felt heavy and suffocating, as if each corner was hiding a dark secret. After a few minutes, Tom got up and went to the shelf, but he didn't just grab the spices. He pulled out something else, a small object I couldn't identify. "What is this?" he asked, holding up a small wooden picture frame. My eyes widened. "Leave that alone, Tom. Don't touch things we don't understand." "Why?" "There's nothing wrong with it," he replied, but there was a defensiveness in his voice. He seemed more irritated than usual, and that made me uncomfortable. Just don't touch it, okay?" I didn't know how to explain the feeling that was creeping over me. Clara's diary spoke of a life interrupted, and I didn't want my children to get involved in something they couldn't comprehend. He rolled his eyes and put the picture frame back on the shelf. "You're acting strange, Mom." "I'm just trying to keep the house in order, Tom," I replied, trying not to let the fear within me show. "We need to focus on doing something normal, like a family dinner." "Normal?" How can we have anything normal with all this happening? He retorted, his frustration boiling over. Since we got here, everything has changed. It was true. Since our arrival, the house seemed to have a life of its own, shifting and transforming as we explored its secrets. And now, with Tom having nightmares and Lily becoming involved with an invisible girl, our notion of normalcy had faded. With each passing night, I felt the house closing in around us. Tom was growing more distant, and Lily seemed to be losing her connection with her brother. In a moment of desperation, I decided it was time to act. I needed to understand what was happening and protect my family. The next morning, while Tom was at school and Lily was in the living room, I went to the library, determined to uncover more about the house's history. Clara's diary lay open on the table, its yellowed pages calling to me. I opened it again, rereading the words that had left me unsettled. The girl had lived here, and her fate was tragic. She was a child who had been abandoned after an accident. Why would anyone abandon a child? I murmured to myself, as a wave of sadness washed over me. Why didn't Clara get the forgiveness she so desperately needed? The pages continued to tell her story, each one more painful than the last. The feeling that Clara was still trapped here, among us, was almost tangible. She wanted help, but what kind? I needed to understand. ###e mais importante, precisava proteger meus filhos. At the end of the day, as I was preparing dinner, a weight in my heart wouldn't let me be at peace. Tom came home, and his somber look sent a chill down my spine. He was more distant than ever, and when he asked me to help him with his homework, his voice was heavy with anger and discontent. Why don't you talk to Lily? She can help too. I replied, trying to keep my calm. She only talks about Clara. She's obsessed. Tom shot back, slamming his hand on the table. I don't want to hear about that girl anymore. Tom, you need to understand that Clara is part of this house. And if we're not careful, she could hurt us, I said, trying to express my concerns. You don't know what you're talking about, he yelled, standing up abruptly. She's just a dead girl. And I'm not going to let you make me afraid of her. His words cut deep into my heart. Anger and desperation were taking over him, and I felt like I was losing control. Tom, please don't talk like that. The house is full of secrets, and we need to protect ourselves. He stepped away, shaking his head as if trying to rid himself of something. You don't understand, Mom. Clara told me I should help avenge her death. And I don't know what to do. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean by, help avenge? Tom, that's dangerous. You can't believe that. He looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and rage. She said I'm special. That I'm the only one who can do it. And you can't stop me. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. The idea that my son was being manipulated by an entity he didn't understand was terrifying. Tom, you need to listen to me. Clara is not your friend. She's trapped here, and she doesn't want what's best for you. He turned his back to me, heading toward his room. You don't understand anything. His voice echoed through the halls, leaving a trail of sadness in its wake. That night, as I tried to sleep, my mind spun around what Tom had said. I couldn't comprehend how a child could be so manipulative. Clara wasn't a friend, she was an echo of pain and abandonment. I needed to find a way to unravel this mystery before it was too late. The next day brought more tension. Tom was quieter than usual, and Lily seemed worried, though she tried to hide it. During breakfast, the atmosphere was heavy, and I could barely swallow my food. Are you okay, Mom? Lily asked, her voice soft and concerned. Yes, I'm fine. Just a little tired, I replied, trying to smile, but my heart felt tight. I found a spot in the garden where Clara likes to play, Lily said, her voice full of enthusiasm, but I noticed a shadow in her eyes. She's nice, Mom. She just wants help. Lily, you can't trust her, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She's not who you think she is. We need to be careful. But Lily didn't seem convinced. She just wants company. I just want to help her. And what if that means you get hurt too, Lily? Do you understand the risk? My voice was louder than I intended, and the look of disappointment on her face cut me to the core. She looked down and bit her lip. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm just trying to be her friend. That night's dinner was tense. Although the three of us tried to talk, insecurity hung in the air, and each of us seemed to be fighting our own demons. Tom, did you remember your homework? I asked, trying to change the subject. He looked at me, his gaze empty. I don't feel like studying, he replied, his voice monotone. Why don't we try to do it together? I can help, I suggested, but he just turned away, making my heart sink even further. The following day brought a new discovery. While I was in the library, I stumbled upon an old book that seemed to cover the history of the house. I flipped through its pages, hoping to find something that could help us. What I read shocked me. Clara had a tragic story, but there was more. There were references to rituals and the need for release. My God, Clara isn't just a lost girl. She's trapped here by something much deeper, I murmured, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. With my mind racing, I knew I needed to act. I couldn't let Clara's influence grow stronger in my children's lives. I looked at the book again, determined to find a way to free Clara while protecting my family. That night, as I tried to sleep, a thought haunted me. What if I couldn't save Tom from Clara? What if her influence was stronger than I could imagine? Despair consumed me, and I knew I needed to find a solution quickly. And so, the fight to protect my family and free Clara began. The night was tense. The silence that usually enveloped the house now felt distant, only replaced by a disturbing sound, children's laughter. It came from somewhere down the dark hallway, as if invisible children were playing in the shadows. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine, paralyzing me in place. Sarah was beside me, her face pale, her wide eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Did you hear that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, I managed to reply, but it sounded more like a groan than a confirmation. I don't know what's happening. The whispers and laughter continued, as if they were playing with our sanity. I looked at Sarah and saw the shadow of fear etched on her face. It was as if the house had come alive, a malevolent presence watching us. I hesitated at the door of our room, curiosity pulling me forward. What else could happen? What else was this house hiding from us? Should we investigate? I asked, trying to convince myself it was a good idea. But really, I was more interested in understanding what was happening with Tom and Lily. Sarah shook her head, still in shock. I don't know, love. What do you want us to do? What if it's dangerous? That left me pondering. Dangerous. It was a word that had become common in our vocabulary since we arrived. But what could be more dangerous than leaving things as they were? Listening to those laughs and whispers, uncertainty turned into a growing urgency. We need to know what's happening to Tom, and if it's somehow related to Clara, I insisted, needing her to understand. Do you think he's in danger? Her tone was filled with concern, and I could see the anguish reflected in her eyes. I don't know. But if he's talking to her, we need to understand the nature of that friendship. It may not be what it seems. Sarah took a deep breath, and I could see her trying to stay strong. Then let's go. But we need to be careful. With renewed determination, we decided to leave the room and explore the house. Every step was accompanied by a creak of the floor, as if the house was warning us not to proceed. When we reached the hallway, the children's laughter abruptly ceased, leaving a deadly silence in the air. A chilling cold swept through the atmosphere, and the darkness seemed to intensify. Tom. I called, my voice echoing down the hallway. There was no answer. Just the sound of my own breathing. He must be in his room. Let's go, Sarah said, moving ahead, but I followed closely, my heart racing. When we reached Tom's room, I knocked lightly. "Tom, are you in there?" I asked, anxiety rising. "It's not locked," Sarah noted, slowly pushing the door open. The room was dark, but moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Tom was lying on his bed, eyes closed, an anguished expression on his face. A sense of despair washed over me at the sight. I approached him, gently touching his arm. "Tom, wake up," I called, but he didn't respond. "Tom." Finally, he opened his eyes, and confusion mixed with fear in his gaze. "What happened?" His voice was hoarse. Hashtag, 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 we were worried about you. Did you have nightmares again?" Sarah asked, and I observed her, noting the concern etched on her face. He nodded slowly, the expression of pain intensifying. "Clara was here. She said I needed to help her." My heart sank. Clara. Her name echoed in my mind like a warning. What did she ask, Tom? What did she say? I tried to keep calm, but the tension in my body was palpable. She talked about her family, about how she can't rest. And that I have to help her. He seemed confused, his voice trembling. Help her how? I insisted, trying to understand. To get revenge. The words slipped from his lips like a chilling whisper. Those words echoed in my mind, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Revenge on whom? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I don't know, he shouted, frustration making his voice resonate in the room. She just said she needed help. I don't want her to be mad at me. That broke my heart. Tom was as scared as we were. I looked at Sarah and saw her struggling against tears. Tom, you need to tell us everything. We can't help if we don't know what's going on. Clara could be dangerous. He hesitated, staring at the floor. I didn't want to tell because I'm scared. Clara said that if I didn't help her, she would leave me. Leave how? I asked, urgency rising in my voice. She said she would take me with her. The panic on his face was undeniable. Sarah stepped closer, placing her hand on Tom's shoulder. We'll find a way to help her, but we need you to tell us everything you know. You're not alone in this. Tom looked at us, and I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. She said she was trapped and couldn't leave because she hadn't forgiven her family. But I don't know how to help. Those words resonated within me. Clara was trapped in her own pain, and now she was trying to drag Tom into that darkness. We needed to act, and quickly. I looked at Sarah, and she seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. We need to find out more about Clara and what happened to her. If she really is trapped here, maybe there's a way to help her find peace, I said, trying to formulate a plan. But how? Sarah asked, anguish visible on her face. I don't know yet, but we should start investigating. Lily mentioned a journal she found in the library. It might contain something we need to know. I looked back at Tom. You need to promise to stay away from Clara until we find out more. Tom nodded, though the expression on his face showed he was struggling with the idea. But she's my friend. Friendship shouldn't cost your safety, Tom. We need to protect you, Sarah asserted, and I could feel the determination in her voice. As the tension hung in the air, I realized we were all in a dangerous game. Clara wasn't just a lost child, she was an entity manipulating the situation, and if we weren't careful, we could lose Tom forever. Tom looked at us, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. What do I do if she comes back? If that happens, you need to call us. Don't face this alone, I said, trying to convey confidence. I promise, he replied, but hesitation still lingered in his voice. Looking at Tom's expression, I realized he was battling something far greater than us. And at the same time, the feeling that something was approaching, something dark we couldn't see, left me uneasy. With one last look at my son, we left the room, aware that the battle was far from over and that we needed to be prepared for whatever was to come. The darkness enveloped the garden, and a sense of anguish grew in my chest. I knew Clara was out there somewhere, waiting for me. My hands trembled slightly as I walked toward the darkest corner, where the shadows seemed to dance around me. The smell of wet grass mixed with the cold night air enveloped me, but the presence of the invisible girl was far more palpable. When I found her, she was leaning against a fallen tree, her eyes shining in the dim light like beacons in the dark. "Lily," she said, her voice a whisper, almost like an echo. "You came." I came," I replied, hesitating. "You said you needed help." Clara nodded, her small body trembling slightly. "I'm trapped here. I can't leave." "Trapped? What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You're just a child. Why can't you just move on?" She looked down, her disheveled hair swaying gently with the breeze. "I died in an accident. In the yard. But I couldn't forgive my family for leaving me alone. They abandoned me." A chill ran down my spine. What Clara was saying was tragic and painful, but the idea that she was trapped because of unresolved bitterness seemed even more distressing. "You need to let them go, Clara. They're not here anymore, and you can't stay trapped because of that." She raised her eyes, and I saw a mix of pain and anger. "I can't. If I don't have their forgiveness, I can't go. And if I can't leave, I'll take someone with me." Her words echoed in my mind like a warning, and my heart raced. "Take someone? What do you mean?" "Tom," Clara said, the name slipping from her lips like a threatening whisper. "He's special. He can help, but he can also be trapped here, just like me." A knot formed in my throat. "You can't do that, Clara. You can't involve Tom in this pain. He's just a child, and you can't manipulate him." "He's my friend," Clara replied, her voice rising slightly. "He understands me. He will help me. But at what cost?" I asked, concern weighing heavily in my heart. "You can't want him to suffer like you did. That's not right." Clara stepped closer, her eyes now seeming darker. "You don't understand. If he doesn't help me, I'll be alone again. And I don't want to be alone." The sadness in her voice hit me like a punch. I felt the pain she carried, but I couldn't allow it to turn into something darker. "Clara, you need to find a way to forgive. Not just your family, but yourself. You can't let this pain control you." She hesitated, an internal battle playing out in her gaze. "What if I can't? What if I don't know how?" "Then we can try together," I said, trying to be as encouraging as possible. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here." A tear rolled down Clara's cheek. "Why do you care about me?" "I'm just a girl who died. Because everyone deserves to be free, Clara. And you deserve to find peace. If you don't forgive yourself, you'll remain trapped here, and that's not fair. Not to you, or to anyone." Clara looked at me, her expression softening a bit. "Do you really think I can be free?" "Yes," I replied firmly. "I believe you can. And you deserve that, Clara. You deserve to be happy." The intensity of our conversation enveloped us, and for a moment, the shadows around us seemed to dissipate. But soon, Clara's expression hardened again. "But I can't go without their forgiveness. And they will never forgive me." "You don't know that," I said, trying to be optimistic. "If you can connect with them, maybe they can understand your pain. We can't change the past, but we can change the present." "You don't understand." Clara shouted, her voice echoing in the stillness of the night. "They abandoned me. They didn't care when I needed them the most. I understand that you're hurt, but if you keep this up, you'll end up hurting others too, I said, desperation starting to take hold of me. What do you really want? To take revenge on them and stay trapped in this pain, or to find a way to freedom? Clara fell silent, her gaze distant. I just want them to feel what I felt. The pain of being left behind. But that won't bring you peace, I insisted. Revenge doesn't bring happiness. You need to find forgiveness, not just for them but for yourself. ####, she hesitated, and I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. What if I don't know how? Then we'll figure it out together, I replied, extending my hand toward her. I promise I won't leave you alone. We'll find a way to make this happen. Clara looked at my hand for a moment, and then, slowly, she reached out hers. Would you really do that for me? With all my heart, I confirmed. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself. We'll work on it, one step at a time. But before we could continue, a heavy presence enveloped the air around us. The atmosphere became dense, and I felt a wave of cold sweep over me. Clara recoiled, her eyes widening. No, not now. Clara. I called, but the girl seemed to be losing control. What's happening? She can't know. Clara screamed, her voice now tinged with panic. She can't find out I'm here. Who? What do you mean? I asked, feeling the tension rise around us. But Clara was already fading away, the light in her body dimming slowly. Lily, I need you. Don't let her find me. Clara, don't go. I shouted, reaching out in an attempt to grab her. But in the blink of an eye, she disappeared into the darkness, and I was left alone, the weight of solitude settling in once more. The air was thick, and a sense of despair enveloped me. Clara. I called out again, but my voice echoed in vain. What could I do to help her? How could I free her from this pain? The darkness became oppressive, and a feeling of helplessness washed over me. I looked around, searching for any sign of her, but all I saw was the silence and gloom of the garden. What could I do to save Clara? How could I help her find the forgiveness she desperately needed? With my heart racing, I decided I couldn't give up. Clara needed me, and I wouldn't let her be alone again. I would find her again, no matter what it took. She deserved a chance to be free, and I would do everything in my power to help her. With that determination in mind, I began to walk back home, my heart heavy but my hope still burning. The connection I had with Clara was strong, and I knew there was still a chance to save her, even if it meant confronting the shadows of the past. I just needed to figure out how. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, and I felt that the decisive moment was approaching. After everything that had happened, I knew I needed to do something to protect Tom and Lily from Clara. The thought that the presence of that girl could lead my son to a dark fate kept me on constant alert. My heart racing, I went to the library, where I had found that old book that seemed to hold the secrets of the house and, perhaps, the key to freeing us all. I carefully opened the book, the smell of mildew and aged paper filling my nostrils. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, some almost illegible. What caught my attention the most was a chapter that spoke about rituals to free tormented spirits. With the dim light of the lamp, I began to read aloud. To free a trapped spirit, it is necessary to invoke the light and bring forth the memories that bind it to this world. Forgiveness is the key. If the spirit does not receive forgiveness, it will not find peace. I looked at Lily's face, which was beside me, her eyes filled with hope and fear. Do you think this will work, Mom? Her voice trembled, and I understood her anguish. Clara had become a shadow over us, and time was running out. We have to try, Lily. It's our only option, I replied, trying to convey confidence, even though I was just as scared as she was. If Clara is trapped here because of something that happened in the past, we need to help her find that peace. The idea of performing a ritual in our home, where there had already been so much pain, made me nervous. But what worried me more was what could happen if we did nothing. I looked back at the book and began gathering the materials we would need: a white candle, symbolizing light and purification, and a container of water, representing life. I also picked some flowers that were in the kitchen window, as the book suggested they could help create a conducive environment. As I organized everything, the atmosphere seemed to shift. A cold breeze swept through the room, causing objects to tremble slightly. Lily and I exchanged worried glances, but I knew we couldn't give up. "Let's begin," I declared, trying to keep calm. Slowly, we created a space on the living room floor, where I placed the candle in the center, surrounded by the flowers and the container of water. As I prepared, Lily remained silent, watching my every move. The tension was palpable. "Mom, do you really think Clara will hear us?" she asked, a mix of hope and doubt in her voice. "If she's still here, then there's still a part of her that wants to be free. We need to show her we can help," I replied, trying to convince myself that we were doing the right thing. With everything ready, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I began to call for Clara, softly speaking her name. "Clara, if you can hear us, we're here to help you. Don't be afraid. Come to us." A wave of silence settled in the room, and I opened my eyes, hoping to see some response. But what happened next left me in shock. The candlelight began to flicker, and a shadow started to form around us. Could it be Clara? Fear and anticipation intertwined within me. "Clara, are you there?" I asked, my voice nearly failing. The air felt thick, and I could sense the energy shifting. Then, in a whisper, a child's voice responded, "I'm here." Lily took a step back, her eyes wide and filled with terror. "Mom, I don't know if this is a good idea." She looked visibly frightened, but I couldn't back down now. Clara needed us. "Clara, why are you trapped here? What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The shadows danced around us, and the figure of the girl began to materialize, but there was something dark in her eyes. "I can't leave. They abandoned me," Clara replied, her voice echoing sadly. "No one forgave me. I just want them to feel my pain." The weight of those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew Clara was confused, trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment. "Clara, we want to help you. Forgiveness can set you free. You need to remember what happened." She hesitated, and the shadows around her seemed to intensify. "I can't. They left me. I can't forgive them." "But you don't have to carry this pain alone," I said, desperate. "If you don't forgive, you'll never find peace. And you risk hurting those you love." The words spilled from me like a scream. I knew Tom was in danger, and that gave me courage. "Clara, think about your family. Think about how you feel. If you don't let this go, you're going to hurt those you love." The figure of the girl began to tremble, and I realized that the struggle between good and evil was unfolding before us. "Mom, what do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. "We need to keep going. Let's invoke the light and show Clara she's not alone," I replied, determined. "Let's tell her we love her." With that, I picked up the candle and raised it, feeling the energy around us increase. "Clara, you're not alone. You are loved, and we want you to find peace. Free yourself from this pain and come to the light." The shadows around her seemed to hesitate, and I could sense that I was making progress. "Please, Clara, forgive. Let your heart open. Don't let this pain keep you trapped," I pleaded, my voice growing stronger. It was then that the room began to shake, and objects around us started to move. The glass in the windows vibrated, and the candlelight went out, plunging everything into darkness. "Mom, what's happening?" Lily screamed, gripping my arm. "It's Clara. She's fighting." I replied, trying to stay calm. "We need to be strong. We can't give up now." Hashtag. The air was charged with energy, and everything around us seemed like a blur. Clara's figure began to contort in agony, as if trapped between two worlds. "Help me," she shouted, her voice echoing in desperation. "Come on, Clara. You need to want to break free. Forgiveness is your path." I yelled, sensing that the situation was reaching its climax. The shadows wrapped around her more tightly, and I knew the moment was approaching. "Clara, you are strong. Remember who you truly are. You don't have to suffer anymore," I cried, my voice resonating within the walls of the house. The atmosphere grew tenser, and I realized I was about to lose Clara, the entity that had become a shadow. "Clara, I'm here. I love you. You are not alone." I believed that my words could penetrate the darkness surrounding her. Clara's figure began to fade, and light started to shine again, but it was a struggle. "Help me," her voice pleaded once more, and I knew I had to do something more. "Clara, I forgive you. Please forgive yourself. You are worthy of love and peace." With every word, the environment seemed to brighten, but the malevolent presence was still fighting against us. I felt the battle intensifying, and the energy around us was about to explode. "Lily. Hold my hand. Together, we will bring Clara to the light." I pulled her closer, and our hands joined, forming a bond of love and determination. "Clara, come. You are loved and need to be free. Forgiveness is the key," I shouted, my voice echoing through the space. The shadows began to dissipate, and Clara's figure started to clear. The light enveloping the room intensified, and I felt we were about to achieve redemption. The atmosphere was in ecstasy, and for a brief moment, everything seemed possible. The environment in the room was charged with tension, and I felt my heart racing frantically. The lit candles flickered, casting unsettling shadows on the walls, while the air remained cold, almost as if the house itself was breathing. Clara was not willing to give up, the determination in her spectral presence was palpable, and I knew I had to act quickly to save Tom while helping Clara find peace. I looked at Tom, who was paralyzed, his expression reflecting both fear and a strange curiosity. He held the diary he had found in the library, the same one Lily had read, but now his hands trembled. "Tom," I called, trying to convey confidence in my voice. "We need to do this together. You need to read a passage from the diary. Something that can help Clara understand she doesn't need to threaten us anymore." He hesitated, his eyes fixed on Clara's spectral figure, floating in a corner of the room. "What if she doesn't like it? What if it makes things worse?" Tom asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I don't know, but we have to try. We can't let Clara take you away from us," I replied, trying to hide the worry that consumed me. "If you don't do this, she might get even angrier." Tom took a deep breath, and with a determined expression, he grabbed the diary. "Okay, I'll try." He turned to Clara, who watched him with a mix of expectation and anger. "Clara, I'm going to read something for you." "No. You shouldn't." Clara shouted, her voice echoing like a howling wind. "I don't want you to do this, Tom. You don't understand." "I understand that you need help," Tom replied, his voice starting to firm up. "I think you don't realize what you're doing. You're hurting the people you love." "Love? Love is a weakness," Clara retorted, her tone becoming threatening. "You should help me, Tom. Together, we can be strong. We need revenge." "Revenge is not the answer," I intervened, desperate. "Clara, you won't find peace this way. Please, listen to what Tom is about to read." With a confused look, Tom opened the diary and began to read aloud. His voice, although trembling, echoed through the room. "Once, in a moment of pain and loss, I wrote that forgiveness is the key to freedom, that if we don't forgive, we will be condemned to live with pain forever." I could see Clara's expression change. She seemed to hesitate, as if Tom's words were hitting her somehow. "Stop. I don't want to hear this." She screamed, but there was a nervousness in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Clara," Tom continued, ignoring her words. "You don't need revenge. You can be free. You deserve to be free, just as we deserve to live in peace." The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The candles flickered more intensely, and a cold wind began to blow, as if the house itself was reacting to what we were doing. Clara stirred, her spectral form starting to distort. "They abandoned me. I want them to suffer. But you can't let that consume you," I said, my voice steady. "You are not alone. You can find peace. You can forgive." "Forgive," Clara murmured, her words almost inaudible. She seemed lost in thought. "But how can I forgive them? They left me to die alone." "Maybe you need to forgive yourself first," I suggested, feeling that empathy could be the key. "You are not a bad child, Clara. You were a wounded child. And now, you can heal. You can let go." Tom, encouraged by my words, continued reading, his voice stronger and clearer. "The mistakes we make do not define who we are. Forgiveness is an act of love, and you can free yourself from this pain that is holding you back." "Free myself," Clara repeated, her voice now softer, almost a whisper. Her form began to glow softly, as if a ray of light was piercing through the darkness that surrounded her. However, the dark presence that accompanied her was not willing to give up so easily. The room began to tremble, and objects started flying around, crashing against the walls as if a storm was forming around us. "You can't leave me!" Clara screamed, her voice now filled with despair. "I don't want to be alone again. We're here with you." Tom shouted, his determination growing. "You're not alone, Clara. You never were. Look at us. We want to help you." The environment continued to stir, and the shadows danced around us. "Tom, keep reading." I yelled over the growing noise. It might be the only thing keeping her connected to the light. Tom, now resolute, continued to read aloud. "When we find the courage to forgive, we also find freedom. Freedom is not just for others, but for ourselves. You don't have to carry this burden alone, Clara." The dark presence began to recede, and I saw tears forming in Clara's eyes. "Freedom," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I don't know how. I don't know if I can." "You can," I reassured her, feeling a wave of hope rising within me. "Just take the first step. Forgive yourself. Let go. We believe in you." Clara hesitated, her spectral form beginning to slowly dissipate before us. I want to try," she said, her voice trembling. "But what if I can't?" "We're here with you," Tom reaffirmed, his voice filled with love and determination. "You're not alone. Not anymore." With one last look at us, Clara began to dissolve into a soft, bright light. I knew we were close to liberation, but the battle was still not won. "You need to accept, Clara." I cried, desperate for her to understand. "You are stronger than you think." As my words echoed, the room began to calm, and the shadows that had once surrounded Clara started to fade. The light radiating from her intensified, illuminating the entire space. Clara looked at Tom and me, her expression now gentler, almost as if she were beginning to understand. I forgive," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I forgive myself, and them." With that, the light erupted into a blinding brilliance, and I shut my eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of warmth and peace wash over the room. When I opened my eyes again, Clara had vanished, but the atmosphere was completely different. There was no longer any anger or sadness, only a profound sense of relief and freedom. ##### Tom looked at me, his eyes filled with tears but also with hope. "Mom, do you think she's at peace now?" "I hope so, my love," I replied, pulling him into a tight embrace. I hope she has finally found the light. In that moment, as the echoes of pain and conflict faded, we felt the house, once so heavy and oppressive, begin to breathe again. The light that had flooded the room seemed to promise a new beginning, a fresh chance for us and for Clara's memory. The air was thick with tension as I faced Clara, the entity that had tormented my family for so long. The room was cloaked in dancing shadows, and I could feel her presence, a force both familiar and terrifying. Clara's gaze, once filled with desperation and rage, now reflected profound sadness. "You don't understand, Lily," she began, her voice echoing like a whisper in the wind. "I am not just a child trapped here. I am a part of you. Part of what you don't want to remember." My hands trembled as I tried to process her words. "What do you mean?" "You are Clara. You are the girl who died here. This has nothing to do with me." The mist in the room seemed to encourage her words, as if the environment itself was trying to convince me of something I didn't want to believe. "No, Lily," Clara insisted, her tone now more assertive. "I am the child you abandoned. The pain you buried. When you came here, you brought with you all your unresolved memories. I am your guilt, your fear of not being enough, your sadness for leaving behind who you truly were." I looked at her, confused, trying to understand how a dead girl could be a part of me. "That doesn't make sense. I never knew you. Why would I feel guilty for something I didn't do? Don't you remember?" Clara asked, her voice now almost a lament. "You've forgotten who you were. The girl who dreamed, who played, who loved. You became the perfect mother but forgot the girl you left behind. I am her memory. And now, if you don't free me, I will take Tom with me." My heart raced at the mention of my son's name. The idea of losing Tom to this entity sent me into a panic. "You can't do that. He has nothing to do with your pain." "But he is your only connection to me," Clara replied, her expression becoming more intense. "I just want to be heard, dear. Forgive me, and you will forgive yourself. Free me, and you will be free." Her words pierced my heart like sharp blades. I didn't know if I was ready to face the pain of a past I had tried to bury. But how? How can I forgive you if I don't even know who you really are? "You know," Clara whispered, now closer to me. "You just need to look within yourself. Forgiveness begins in your heart. You need to remember the girl you were. If you don't remember me, I will never be free." The shadows around us began to stir, and I felt an increasing pressure in the atmosphere. What was happening? What did Clara want from me? I looked at Tom, who was frozen in a corner of the room, and saw the anguish on his face. My instinct as a mother kicked in, and I knew I had to act quickly. "Clara!" I shouted, my voice a mix of anger and fear. "You can't use my son like this. He is not a tool for your vengeance. You have to understand that the pain of the past cannot become a cycle of suffering." She hesitated, and for a moment, her expression softened. "I don't want him to suffer. But I am a part of you, and you need to set me free. Forgiveness is the only way out." Tears began to slip down my face as memories resurfaced. I remembered being a child, the smile on my face, the dreams I had. I was happy, but there was something I had left behind. A pain that haunted me, something I chose to ignore. The pain of being a mother who didn't know how to handle her own emotions, who lost herself in the role she chose to take. I remember," I murmured. "I remember who I was. I had dreams, Clara. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be happy." "Yes," she exclaimed, her figure beginning to glow with a faint light. "Now you understand. Forgiveness is not just for me, it's for you too, Lily. You need to forgive yourself for leaving that part of you behind." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath and trying to gather all the courage I had. I forgive you, Clara. And I forgive myself for not being the mother you deserved. I forgive myself for not being the person I always dreamed of being." At that moment, the light in Clara began to shine brightly, and the atmosphere around us seemed to change. The shadows that once surrounded her began to dissipate, and a warm glow filled the room. Clara smiled, and her expression of sadness transformed into a peace I had never seen before. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now melodic. "You have no idea what this means. Now, I can leave. Your light has freed me." "Clara, wait!" I shouted, feeling an impulse to hold on to her. "You don't have to go. Stay with me, please." "I will always be with you," she replied, now floating towards the light that began to fill the room. "Inside you, always. And remember, Lily, forgiveness is the key to happiness. Never forget who you really are." As I watched Clara drift away, a feeling of relief and freedom washed over me. The shadows that had once surrounded me were now dissipating, revealing a bright light. The environment felt lighter, and I could sense that the pressure that had suffocated me for so long had finally vanished. Tom looked at me, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Mom, what happened? What was Clara?" She was trapped, Tom," I said, my voice trembling but filled with hope. "She was a part of me that I didn't recognize. And now, I've set her free." He approached me and hugged me, and in that moment, I felt we were together again as a family. It was as if the weight we had been carrying on our shoulders had been lifted, and the light that filled the room now illuminated our hearts. "I don't want to be afraid anymore, Mom," Tom said, his voice soft. "I just want to be happy." "I want that too, my love," I replied, wrapping him in my arms. "And we will be together. We will remember the light and the joy. We will never let darkness hold us captive again." The house, once a place of pain and despair, now radiated a new energy. The past had been confronted and, finally, left behind. I knew that Clara would always be a part of me, but now, instead of fear, there was love and forgiveness. And so, with Clara's memories illuminating our hearts and the promise of a brighter future ahead, we left the house, ready for a new beginning.